Hello, I'm Tim Harris. This is Julie Harris, and this is Real Estate Coaching Radio.
That's right. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for popping by. Hit that like button, and don't forget to leave your comments and questions so we can get right back with you.
We will. Thank you for continuing to make our podcast, Real Estate Coaching Radio, the #1 listened to podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States. And let us know what you think about this video. Leave your comments below. Thank you.
Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Hey, welcome back. Julie and I are going to be drilling down today more on listings specifically as to getting price reductions. In other words, positioning the houses correctly in the market so it correctly reflects the market's expectations. So today's show is called Help Me, My Real Estate Listings Aren't Selling. Now, this is the second in a series that we've done on the same topic, and the reason that we're drilling down on this is because the market is shifting fast. It's changing fast. Julie's going to be sharing with you some experiences she had on some of her coaching calls from agents around the country. And what we're seeing, and what we knew was going to happen, was kind of obvious, is we're seeing was going to be a long-term trend towards the leveling off in pricing. Now, do we believe that homes are going to drop in value? Just be very clear about this. No, we do not. Do we believe that the appreciation of the inflation in homes is going to keep up with the same pace it's been for, frankly, years now? No, we do not. We do believe what you're going to see is the inflation or the appreciation of real estate is going to drop fairly dramatically, fairly fast, and then it's going to stay at a moderate single-digit level for some time to come. What's some time to come? Probably 10 years. That's realistically the cycle that we're in now. It's not a bad cycle if you know how to sell real estate or get price reductions and essentially work with buyers in this market. Where a lot of agents are going to suffer is they don't know how to transition from the old market to the new market. Transition educationally, transition frankly, financially, and mostly transition in terms of what their mindset is about the old market. They're waiting and hoping and praying that the old market returns, and it is not. Welcome to the new reality. So, Julie, you were sharing with me right before we started the pod today some calls you've been having from some agents that have been in these sort of long-term, very stable, predictable sellers markets, and the changes that they're now seeing, or the changes they're putting in place with their teams and their brokerages.
Yes, that's right. So one of the things that is being reported, and this is one of the advantages of being involved with yes, we're worldwide. We have podcast listeners all over the world, but by and large, most of you guys are, in the US, in Canada, anywhere from Guam to, we have a listener in Barbados, but in the States, right? So we listen to you guys all over, and by and large, the report is the following. The sellers who have to sell, the best sellers, the ones that are pretty serious, they are indeed reducing their prices. How do you know this? Those of you who actually watch your update sheets, your hot sheets from your MLS that get sent to your email, or you can set it up to get different things that you're looking at, you're going to see lots of price reductions. We watch them in all of the markets we watch. So price reductions amongst people who have to sell. Then we also have more expireds, because many of the listing agents only had 30 or 60-day listing agreements in anticipation of the houses selling overnight.
We've been telling you guys about all this for the last probably year that this was going to start really happening. And I'll tell you, it did surprise basically everyone, but it definitely surprised Julie and I how fast the market did change, not just the real estate market, but the economy in general. And that change is just getting started. So what we're going to see again is a long-term reshuffling of the deck. And really what that means as pertains to you, dear listener, is whether or not you're going to be at the bottom of the deck or the top of the deck. And that really does come down to your ability to, move past where you're hoping and praying the market, returns to, and move towards what the market is certainly going to be. So if you're in a market right now where there are no price reductions, where there are no expireds, well, it's coming your way. It's coming to a market near you. So be ready. So use this in preparation, this 11 ways to sell your listing fast. Have this set aside for when the market does change, so you've already got a plan in place. And if you're in a market, and Julie just gave you some indicators as to where you can go and look in the MLS and find out what's actually happening next, Well, go into the MLS, look to see what's happening next, and lo and behold, you're going to see days in the market is extending, list to sell price ratio is falling. You're going to see obviously more price reductions. You're going to see the market starting to normalize back in favor of a balanced market. And that is a good thing, by the way, on a whole. This hyperactive seller's market that we've been experiencing for a long period of time, from an economic perspective, from frankly just a potential homeowner's perspective, it's been really brutal. But this is going to be a return to normalcy for the most part. You have to be part of the new market. Don't just be a shooting star because of the past seller's market. Be somebody who's going to be in this business for decades. Make this your thing because of this market. So we're going to go relatively quick through the 11 ways to sell your listings fast. And again, this is also something you should set aside, maybe share with other agents. If you're running a brokerage or a team, definitely use this for educating your agents. Get ahead of the curve because the shift is happening to every market in the country in differing levels. And this is not something to be fearful of. We're not going to have a retrenchment of pricing. We're not going to see prices go back down. We're not going to see a big precipitous drop like we did during the great housing crash. Julie and I did a number of podcasts and YouTubes on this very topic, so make sure you go back and listen to one in particular called 15 Reasons Why There Will Not Be a Housing Crash. And we did say on that podcast and on that YouTube video, and I'll say it again, the only reason we might be wrong is if the economy goes to a place where, we can only hope and pray it doesn't get this bad, but if there's mass unemployment, then all bets are off to a certain extent, and the extent being we still don't believe, even if worst case scenario were to happen, which we're not predicting, which frankly nobody is, even the Peter Schiffs of the world, they're not predicting worst case. But even if that were to happen, even if there were some sort of hyperinflation and mass unemployment, we do not believe, not for 2 seconds, that the government would allow any kind of foreclosure train to leave the station. So nothing is going to be like it was last time, worst case scenario. So at the end of the day, if you have the skill set, once you have the skill set, if you have the mindset to be of service to other people, you are going to do so incredibly well in this market because of this market. Frankly, many of you are going to be more successful because of this market than you ever would have been in the previous market, which was largely based on fluff and discounting commissions and overpricing listings and speculation. Now we're entering into a real market that's going to be where you're going to require real skills. So 11 ways to sell your listings fast.
Yes.
Number 1.
Well, so we're talking about unexpected ways you can get your listings sold faster. We talked about why it might not have sold in a previous podcast. So this is all instead of or in addition to price adjustments. Do any or all of the following. These are unexpected things you guys probably have never dealt with before. For example, number 1, your seller, again, in addition to or instead of a price adjustment, can contribute, let's say, $10,000 towards buyer's closing costs. This can help a buyer buy down the interest rate and lock it in at potentially far lower than the going mortgage rate.
And here's a good advanced way of thinking about this. This is, again, something that we did when we sold real estate into housing crash. We had all of our coaching clients do the same thing. Go to a non-lazy Larry, the loan officer, a non-lazy one, and have them have a rate sheet of what the payment on that house would be if the rate was bought down. Have the seller pre-agree to basically set aside the money to buy the rate down. That way the borrower walks into the house, sees the house, likes the house, hopefully, sees the rate sheet, sees the payment on said house because the seller's already arranged for the loan officer to make it so the mortgage will be less, and then you have a transaction.
That's right. And in fact, the impact for the buyer is superior. Take, for example, if your listing is, say, $550,000 and you're thinking maybe you've got to talk the seller into going to $525,000, maybe you do this first because the impact to the buyer on their payment is going to be more significant than actually spending $25,000 less on the house.
So let's say that again. Let me repeat what Julie just said. Now, unfortunately, you're probably not going to avoid the price adjustment, but the first essentially stab at essentially making the house more attractive in terms of a price doesn't have to be lowering the price. Right. It could be lowering the borrower's payment. And that's what point number 1 is all about. And
ultimately, that costs the seller less.
Right.
And in today's market, that might be all that you need.
And again, that borrower didn't know anything about, buying down closing costs and, essentially making the payment less. You probably don't know about it. Loan officer probably didn't know about it. You will know about it because you're going to find a loan officer that you're going to be able to work with. It's going to show, 3 different scenarios for different payments. And, here's a traditional 30-year fix with just the normal down payment. Here's a 30-year fix with the normal down payment where the seller actually is contributing, $15,000 for buying down the borrower's closing cost, or essentially paying down the points. That is what we're talking about. Take your game to the next level. And I want you guys also to keep in mind that Premier Coaching does teach you how to do all this at a great detail. This is what Premier Coaching is all about. Take action now, guys. Join Premier Coaching. Text the word Premier to 47372. Text the word Premier to 47372. Premier Coaching includes all the scripts, the objection handlers, your 90-day massive action plan. You want to know exactly what to do now. Here's what the 90-day massive action plan is about. You have your fill-in-the-blank real estate treasure map. You have your listing presentation, your buyer presentation. You have your proactive lead generation plan, which is obviously working on expireds and for sale by owners. We give you scripts, objection handlers. Guys, there's so much, but the thing that matters most is, and frankly, the thing that you guys can't believe you're getting for free, is a daily semi-private coaching call with one of our Harris certified coaches. And our Harris certified coaches are the real deal. These are people that have sold real estate in all different markets, who've actually coached agents in all different markets, who've run brokerages in all different markets. That's what it takes to be a Harris certified coach and work directly for Julie and I as part of our coaching organization. You get all of that for free. Just text the word Premier to 47372, or just go to members.timandjulieharris.com. members.timandjulieharris.com. Enroll now. And by the way, did I mention it's free? Point number 2, Julie.
Yes. In addition to, or instead of price adjustments, we can, number 2, have your seller of your listing pay 1 year or maybe even 2 of the Buyers Homeowners Association dues. Those are your HOA dues. Again, paid from the seller's proceeds at closing. None of these things we're suggesting are literally out-of-pocket cash from the seller.
That's a really big point. So some of you are going to say, well, why don't I just get the seller to lower the price? Because lowering the price doesn't give the borrower the cash to buy the rate down, doesn't give the borrower the cash to prepay the HOA fees or the condo fees or whatever. What we're doing is we're making your property more attractive, not by doing a bunch of Instagram marketing and by a fancy brochure and all the rest of it, by really hitting the borrower where it matters, which is their pocketbook, especially in this crazy inflationary time. Point number 3.
Yes, and all of these you would put on your home brochure and in your MLS description so
Absolutely.
people know.
But really, what Julie just said, description, obviously all this is said, is clearly laid out. But the thing is if you start talking about payments and whatnot in the MLS, you're then going to have to do work on disclosures. So our suggestion is you can have that in the second page of the description, but really make sure there's a rate sheet with everything we've described.
No, you would say up to $10,000 contributed to buyer's closing costs, used for a rate buy down, something like that.
Right,
you don't have to quote exact prices.
But be careful when you start getting into rates and you start sounding like a loan officer, that you don't go too far ahead of your skis, because that does require a higher level of disclosures. Point number 3.
Okay, point number 3, seller can pay a year of property taxes for the buyer, or maybe even 6 months. Again, the point here is that's going to be less costly than, say, a $50,000 price reduction, right? So the seller can pay on behalf of the buyer the property taxes for as long 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever makes sense depending on the price range.
Now these first 4 points, now I'm looking at Julie's points, these first 6 points, Julie and I had to do when we sold real estate on really pretty much any of our more expensive listings, because when we sold real estate in Columbus, Ohio, the more expensive listings, they did not even keep up with inflation as far as what their appreciation was. And I'm going to just revisit reality with you guys, because this is what's going to be returning to your market sometime soon. In Columbus, Ohio, if you bought a house that was in the time, let's say 850, or now it's probably more like $1 million or above. No, I bet you it's still 850 or above.
Possibly.
There's an excellent chance that you are going to lose money in that house long term. What are you talking about, Tim? All houses appreciate or what have you. Well, it's because the inflation, the appreciation of the house was less than the interest you were paying on the mortgage, less than the cost of the maintenance and upkeep on the property. Now you add in property taxes, you add in HOA, and you add in all the other ancillary expenses from owning the home. You were actually most certainly losing money on that house.
You were literally lucky to make your down payment back.
Right. It was very normal for us to go on a listing appointment and walk in with the seller and do the net sheet for them. And they were lucky if they've been in the house. In most cases, they had to have been in the house for about 7 years, and they're going to be able to afford essentially covering all the 10% of their house of selling their house. And guys, you have to be really good at fighting for your commissions in situations like that, or you're not going to get paid. That always goes back to the skill set that's necessary to have in a market like this. I'm not saying the market's going to become like that for every one of you, but I am saying for most of you in most of your markets, you are going to need those types of skills, not just on the seller side, but also on the buyer side. Open your mind to the possibilities of what you can create for yourself when you know how to do these types of deals that other agents can't. How about you go to a listing appointment and you're going to list some white elephant house that you're fearful might not sell. Maybe it's got questionable condition or location, but you're going to explain to the seller how you're going to be able to throw some down payment or some, you're going to be able to buy down the points, prepay the property taxes, do some of the other things that Julie described to you guys. That not only is going to make the seller realize that you're thinking out of the box and you're a different kind of agent, but that's going to make that house, 3x, 4x, 5x more attractive to that prospective buyer. And remember, we also have told you guys how to do, and we'll give you more information on this, how to have seller second mortgages, how to do assumable mortgages. We're going to tell you how to do all this. This is all part of Premier Coaching. This is going to be the type of information you need. We're not spending a lot of time talking to you about how to do a TikTok video, are we? We're telling you how to be a real estate professional so you can solve other people's problems, because that's what matters most in a market like this.
Yes, the point is to stand out amongst the competition. You are getting more competition, so you better compete. All right, point number 4. If the house has condition issues, consider what we call decorating allowance or allotment to be escrowed at closing by the seller for the buyer. Always get feedback. So for example, if a buyer loves the house but just can't live with that carpet, the seller can give a carpet allotment, for example, and get that buyer to buy. Sometimes you'll see that in home brochures, and then the buyer will, instead of do that, just say, well, why don't you just have me, pay a little bit less for the house? But you can go either way on this. You can do decorating allotments. You can use different versions of this.
Yep.
Okay, especially if that's your constant feedback.
Or replace the damn carpet.
Which is better, obviously.
But it's true, though. In some cases, you're going to have sellers that don't have the money to do the repairs to the property. I know there's companies out there now that will essentially give the sellers money to fix the houses up and they get paid back at closing. But, in some cases, you're going to have a seller that doesn't have the cash, but they have equity. So they have, a lot of money in value in their house, but they have not the cash to actually do the repairs to the house. And what are your options? You can wholesale the house. You can essentially make the house more attractive to a retail customer. These are all the skill sets you guys are going to need to develop. Point number 5.
Okay, one little thing that we have to add to this. Always do a new seller's net sheet. They're not used to doing that.
Yep.
When you're adding any of these seller's concessions to the transaction, make sure the seller knows how much their bottom line will be impacted. Many of these concessions, again, will cost less than a price reduction or make the price reduction a smaller one when combined with the concession.
And remember, when you're talking to a seller, you guys know you're professionals. Julie and I are professionals. We're using, professional words. Price reduction is obvious what it means. When talking with the seller, never say reduce the price. Always say reposition the house on the market so that we correctly reflect the buyers or the market's expectations. Don't say reduce price. In a market like this, where we haven't fully transitioned over to the market that's going to be, you probably will get fired. So be very careful on that.
Okay.
Next point.
Point number 7. This is a very timely one. We're seeing this in the MLSs now. The seller does not require you to waive your inspection, because we had years where buyers had to waive their inspection. So that makes you different.
It's
a minor point, but it makes you different.
I was thinking, Julie, about the inspection issue itself is something that none of these agents listening have ever dealt with before.
I know.
And so we should do a podcast, as boring as it would be,
yes,
on how to basically, I know the information's over here on Premier Coaching,
yep,
but we should do something on how to show them how to work through inspections, because, the reality of it is a lot of you guys are going to lose deals because you're not going to know how to negotiate an inspection. You're not going to know how to make it so that it's a non-issue. You can have the house pre-inspected and have the seller do all the repairs. That's essentially the easy button for solving the problem. But if the seller doesn't want to do it, or if the seller doesn't want to do it because they know legally, if they then through the inspection become aware of deficiencies or problems with the house, that they'll then be liable for fixing them. You guys understanding what I'm saying here? The seller doesn't want to have the house inspected, doesn't want to have a radon inspection or a mold inspection done, let's say, out of fear that if it's discovered, then they are going to have to disclose it on the property disclosure statement that they know about the problem. So a lot of sellers won't want to do it. So most of these inspection issues are going to come out at the time when the buyer does the inspection. You have to know, Mr. Potential Listing Agent, or frankly, buyer's agent, you're going to have to know how to keep people calm so you can get that deal closed. Otherwise, the washout rate from bad inspections and you guys not knowing how to work inspections is going to be unbelievably bad.
Funny you should mention that. We have a podcast coming up about that very topic. Okay, so point number 8. This is an interesting one that we also did. Advertise payments instead of price. Rates are still historically low and rents are historically high. So help buyers to know what they can afford by purchasing a house versus renting. So your lender can help you run payments. You guys can use mortgagecalculator.org. And yes, you can advertise payments. However, if you do that, you have to have a little asterisk and then disclose how you came up with that payment.
Right. Talk to your lender. Make sure you're getting all the disclosures correct and you can run payments. And I want you to, now here you are, right? I want you to think big picture here. You're now thinking, you're maybe using old school ways of the previous market of thinking it's all about the, so here's a fallacy. I'll give you for example, guys. More exposure of a house for sale does not result in a higher price for the seller. Shall I say that again? More exposure on more social media platforms, on more videos, on more this and the other things, having the house exposed in more different, all kinds of things, Zillow, Realtor.com, all these different portals, all these different agent websites, more exposure does not result in a higher price for the seller. More money that you are feeling maybe you have to spend because no one's ever told you what I just told you, spend to get a house marketed and sold does not result in any net gain for the seller. That is one of the big lies of the previous market. Statistically, guys, no more marketing, more exposure does not result in a higher price. People selling you branding and selling you marketing want you to believe that's true, but it's not true. I'm giving you permission, brokers, teams, to really take a serious look at all of your high-level marketing and fixed costs that you feel because you have forever been spending on your listings, and just stop doing it. The sellers, frankly, if it's showing up in all the normal places, they don't really keep track of whether you're wasting money on all these other things. Virtual tours and 3D tours and Matterport stuff. All that stuff is really cool, but it's really not necessary. At the end of the day, it's price, condition, and location. The reason a lot of agents lean into the tchotchkes is because they don't have the skill set to educate the seller, or frankly their buyer, on how to actually get the property sold. So what they do is they go into this essentially this Cold War tactics of which listing agent is going to spend the most money. In other words, essentially spend the most of what would have been their profit to the point where they're not making any profit. We're going to do open houses every weekend, Mr. Seller. We're going to, have a banner over your house. I'm going to spend tons and tons of money to get your, it does not result in a higher sale price. So this is a good time for you to take a hard look at where you've been wasting money because you thought you had to, because maybe you were given misinformation about this, or maybe you just felt because of the competitive nature of the previous market, you had to spend money like that. Don't do it now. The market has changed. You need to change with the market.
And interestingly enough, not a single one of our points so far have cost a single dime, have they?
It does require time and does require effort. But really, advertising payments, advertising with quotes, right? Wherever the listing appears, a payment should appear. Make sure you have the disclosures, is an unbelievably powerful way to get buyers to call you.
That's right. Point number 9, and you touched on this earlier, have your favorite lender create a rate sheet to give away at showings and open houses. The rate sheet should show 3 different ways of purchasing the home: a 30-year fixed, an adjustable, and something else with the lowest payment. Lenders know to put all the disclosures, how they came up with which payment goes with which type of loan. But the point is, people are so preconditioned to think of the 30-year fixed, they don't realize that they can still buy that house at the payment that they were planning on. They just have to have a different type of mortgage.
Think how different that is, Jules, from 15 years ago, where basically people are preconditioned to never think of a 30-year fix.
I know.
They always looked at 525s or 723s.
Everybody did a 723 or
Everyone
a 5-1 arm or
we
something
did.
like that.
When we took
that's
mortgages,
right. Well, it was worth doing.
It was totally worth doing because most people aren't going to be in the house for 7 years. So if you take, say, for example, a 525 or a 723, this means that the interest rate is going to be fixed for 5 years and a 525, and then it's going to convert to whatever the rate is. In other words, the mortgage itself is going to say, for 5 years, it's this rate, and then on year 6, it's going to convert to this rate. But the borrower can easily refinance before the actual payment adjusts. But what you'll see a lot of people will do, and builders are going to do this, they already are, is they will take that 525 rate, which is usually artificially low, and what they'll do is they'll buy that rate down. So you can get a 525, the first 5-year rate, down to I think you can still get it less than 3%, if not at 3%.
You can buy down as much as 4 points lower with most lenders. So theoretically, you could do an adjustable with a buy down and end up with a really low rate. And remember too, little known fact, with adjustables, the general freak out from agents that don't know about them is that, oh my gosh, well, what if the rate is 15% when it adjusts? Well, adjustables come with language in the loan that says what the limit is. It can only adjust for example, 2 times and with a top increase of 3% or something like that. They all have rules that are all a little bit different. So make sure you know what you're doing.
And again, if you look at most of these, the types of more aggressive stances when getting somebody approved for a loan, I want you to imagine you're standing in front of a buyer or you're standing in front of a prospective seller. Maybe the seller isn't expired, and maybe their agent was somebody they knew from the tennis club. The agent doesn't know any of these things. You know all of these things, and you can explain to the seller that what we need to do, Mr. Seller, in this here's a great script for you guys. This is for expireds. Mr. Seller, sometimes the best homes don't sell. And it's not for the reason you probably been told. That's one of the scripts now that's a great opening salvo to talking to the seller, because the seller probably is expecting you just to beat him over the head with price. Yep. But what often happens, and what we just said was true, sometimes the best homes don't sell, and it wasn't the price. How do we know that's true? Because we've had personal experience. Also, at this point, hundreds of thousands of agents who've listed expired listings, who've then not changed the price, not really even changed the conditions, certainly not the location, put them back in the MLS with a new description, new pictures, and the house sells right away with competing offers. Now, what was the problem? The previous listing agent allowed the listing to go stale in the MLS, stopped getting showings, stopped actually following up with showings to get the property sold, stopped actually being maybe never learn how to be a proactive listing agent. That's the reason you guys need to seriously learn how to be a proactive listing agent, because it's going to benefit both your sellers when you have some, if you have some now, and your prospective buyers. And remember, depending on the price point in which you're listing a house, that buyer that's calling you probably has a house to sell. Mm-hmm. And that buyer who probably has the house to sell wants to buy your house, and maybe as you're listing, that way you can double end it, but maybe they're nervous about the payment because rates have gone up. Well, now you have information on how you can lock in a low rate that's maybe even lower than 3%, like Julie said, for 5 years or maybe 7 years and maybe 10 years. They have 10/20s too. And then you're going to see that buyer who also has a house to sell is going to go and contract on your listing. You're then going to list their house. Oh, guess what? It happens again. You now call a buyer back that was interested in that buyer's house. You then double in that listing, and that person too. You guys get it? This is what happens when you have skills. You don't get this kind of response when you're doing fluffy passive stuff. This is a skills-based market. How do you get the listings in the first place? Because you have the skills to go after the listings, because you're being a proactive lead generator, not waiting around for the phone to ring. Guys, I realize for many of you, this is new information. This is something that you maybe have never even considered was part of the real estate industry, but you've always suspected it because you've seen these top producing agents in your marketplace, or maybe you read about them or seen them on TV, that are successful no matter what direction the market's going, whether it's up, down, buyer, seller, who the president is, what the interest rates are. These are the agents who we have coached. Many of the top agents in the country have been personal coaching clients of Julie and I over the last 20 years that we've been coaching agents. The reality of it is, guys, is those agents will show you the way from their success, how to be successful yourself. The next natural step for all of you is to, guess what? You guessed it right, become a premier coaching client. Text the word Premier to 47372. Text the word Premier to 47372. Or if you don't want to text, or if you're outside the continental United States, that's fine too. Just go to members.timandjulieharris.com. Members.timandjulieharris.com. Remember, when texting, message and data rates may apply. Did I say that right? I think I did. Okay. So go ahead and do that now. That's going to be your homework, guys.
All right, number 10. This is really interesting, and on especially your lower priced and middle of the road listings, always find out, starting today, every new listing you take and all of the listings you have in inventory, find out if your seller has an assumable mortgage. What's the rate and what are the requirements? Okay, so let me just finish this point. Advertise this in your MLS description as well as your home brochure. Now, note to self, all, meaning 100%, of FHA, VA, and USDA mortgages are assumable, and some other loans are as well. What does assumable mean? It means that seller, and remember how many, just an epic hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of mortgages over the past 10 years have an outrageously low rate right now that is locked in and fixed. Okay, so what it means is the new buyer can potentially assume the loan. Now they have to qualify, they have to pay the price the seller is asking. The seller is going to walk away with the same net proceeds, But instead of a regular conventional, the buyer is going to literally assume the mortgage of the seller, the existing mortgage, at a lower rate.
Technically, it's called assumable with release. The mortgage company, or rather the FHA, VA, USDA, is going to have to accept that new borrower as their new customer, but generally speaking...
And releasing the previous seller from the mortgage.
Exactly.
And accepting the new borrower. But, we did some of these and it was not that big of a deal.
This is not owner financing. Be
No.
clear about that. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just what Julie said. Don't be over analytical, asking a bunch of questions in your mind. It's as simple as what we just said. First question is what's the type of mortgage do you have, Mr. Seller? And then you're going to realize that in virtually all cases, that is going to be an absolute 100% incredible golden ticket to getting that listing sold, because you just made your listing more marketable, because you're going to say this listing is assumable with a 3.5% mortgage with release. Do you think if your buyer is looking, or if the prospective buyer is looking between your listing and 10 others, can't you see how that's going to make yours a heck of a lot more attractive?
Once you at least get the phone call, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's also great for lead generation there, guys.
Oh, and by the way, it might be an absolutely killer way for you to buy some rental property, just saying.
Interesting. Okay, number 11, use 1-800-HOME hotline. That is 800homehotline.com on your for sale signs to generate leads and possibly sell your listing yourself. Go to 800homehotline.com for details on that.
1-800-HOME hotline.
Sorry,
1-800-HOME-hotline.com. So 1-800, those are the numbers, 1-800-HOME-hotline.com, and sign up for 1-800-HOME-hotline.com. It's IVR technology, and the way basically it works is that when someone calls, and this is when you have listings, this is an absolutely killer way to start double-ending your listings. One of the best, if not the best systems out there, and it's super cheap. This is the only thing we're telling you to do that costs money.
Yes, but we've also done several dedicated podcasts all about how to utilize 800-HOME hotline, 1-800-HOME
You said it wrong.
hotline.
Yeah, 1-800-HOME-hotline.com. And there's also a video there that explains them how to use it. So 1-800-HOME-hotline.com. All right, Julie, what's their homework?
Homework is to discuss with your seller or sellers who are not selling right away. You guys pretty much define that as after 2 weeks, but maybe it's longer than that, and decide on a new strategy. Alternatively, start employing some or all of these on all of your new listings. You could theoretically do almost all of these. Maybe they don't have an assumable, maybe there's a couple other things that they don't have, but you could basically do 10 out of 11 of these on every single new listing that you have.
So here's your homework. Number 1, obviously join Premier Coaching. Number 2, if you're looking to switch brokerages, or if you're new and you're looking to choose a brokerage, please consider joining Julie and I at eXp Realty. We'd love to be your sponsor. Join Julie and I's eXp Realty group. The easiest way for you to do that is just to text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206, and just in the subject line put the letters EXP, and we'll start the conversation. This is an excellent time for all of you to move over to eXp Realty. So do text me directly, assuming you're ready to move over, at 512-758-0206. In the meantime, guys, listen, we're just getting started on this market cycle. I know there's a lot of people out there that are predicting that sky's going to continue to fall, that the zombies are going to return, the locusts are going to be appearing any day now. And you know what? All those things might be true. And the nice thing about being skilled is you won't care, because when you know what to do, you're going to be like, bring it on, baby. What else you got?
Well, I mean, why do you think all the grizzled veterans are so excited right now?
Totally. Absolutely.
And they are. They're legitimately, they're like chomping at the bit. They cannot wait to be on their coaching sessions to tell the coaches what they did last week, how many listings they took, what they were able to do to get their listings sold, how they were even able to find inventory for their wayward buyers.
It's because in the old market, the consumers, the buyers and the sellers weren't that discerning or choosy who they worked with, especially on the listing side, because they knew the house was going to sell itself. That's the reason the commissions have fallen on both the buyer and the seller side, which, by the way, do you think in a market like this where listings are going to be harder to sell, do you think buyers agents commissions are going to go down or go up? Well, I'll give you the answer. They're going to go up. So what you're going to see is the market is going to dramatically shift very quickly. Next 60 to 90 days, we're going to be in a completely different world. The skills-based agents are going to be ruling the day. That's the reason they're excited. In the past market, when the sellers weren't that careful who they listed with, when the buyers weren't that choosy who they listed with, you had FOMO, you had greed, you had all these types of emotions that were essentially making it so, again, they weren't that selective. That all changes now. Now a seller is going to be very careful. They're going to see their neighbor's house didn't sell. They're going to see all these other headwinds happening in the economy. When you show up at that seller's house just because you know them, because of your stars and influence and past clients, do not assume for a second you're going to get the listing. I know that's different than the way it's been for you in the past, but this is the new reality. Don't wait for your own bad experience to prove to you what I just said is true. Get ahead of the curve. Learn what's necessary in this market. Seriously become guys, right now, it's very simple. Become Premier Coaching clients. First month is 100% free. Just text the word Premier, PREMIER to 47372, or go to members.timandjulieharris.com. Make sure you catch up on the past podcasts, guys. We are going to continue to be hard-hitting. We're going to continue to be direct. We're not going to fill your minds with fluff. We are going to give you the exact actionable information so that you can make this shifting market your market. Do not be fearful. Guys, this is your opportunity to actually create the business of your dreams because of this market, being of service to other people. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right, and don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video, and remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.